Welcome to Satsang.
Hello, Vishrant. Can you please talk about what did you gain from being with Osho Rajneesh?
The simplest answer is I gained life. I met Osho when I was about 28 years old. And up until that point, I'd been into personal development, being successful as a businessman. And in a lot of ways, I had done very well. But it wasn't until I met Osho Rajneesh that I discovered that there was something more important in life than making money, being successful, and partying. There was the heart, there was love. And in his presence, I started to feel the beauty of the Buddha field that he was emanating. And I discovered there was something way, way more important than what I'd been doing. At 28 years of age, I'd already practically retired from business. I'd done very well. And it was just an amazing event, a mischievous event, if you like, of coming in contact with his sannyasins down in Fremantle, West Australia, and going to their restaurant, Zorba the Buddha, and associating with them, and then getting involved with doing a group with a sannyasin called Indava, that changed my life completely. It just changed the direction. It was like suddenly a new wind came in and blew me in a different direction. And there has never, ever, ever been a regret because it's been wonderful. Admittedly, it led to the destruction of Vishrant. That sounds negative, but it's not. It led to the destruction of everything that was in the way of truth, everything that was in the way of heart. It took down all the defense systems. It took down all the belief systems that created contraction when the expectations weren't met of those belief systems. It taught me how to meditate. It taught me how to self-inquire. It taught me that openness was more important than anything. And in listening to him, because I went to America twice and sat with him for 4 months at a time, and then I ended up going to India and sitting with him for another 5 months. I just fell in love with this guy. I fell in love with this man, Osho Rajneesh. He was just magnificent. And he showed me a different way to live. I thought climbing the mountain was about becoming bigger, better, more powerful, more successful in the material world. But there was another mountain, and it was a brilliant mountain. The mountain of higher consciousness and the peak of enlightenment. And he was representing that because that's where he was at. You tune into him and there was nobody there, but a beautiful presence. What an inspiration this man had. I have no idea where I'd be today if I hadn't met him, because you can't know. But I found my heart. And I found beingness as self. How could I ever pay that back? And so you ask, how did Osho affect me, or what did I get out of being with Osho Rajneesh? How about everything? How about everything? He taught me about Zorba, the Buddha, being in the marketplace, but not of it. And here we are today, in the marketplace, but not of it. Are there any questions? Any statements? Any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question is as follows. How did Osho raise your consciousness?
Directly he didn't, but indirectly he did. Indirectly, his Buddha field allowed me clarity to see how my mind was actually operating. And this is one of the gifts of satsang, of being in the presence of someone who's awake. You gain clarity in that field of energy. And with that clarity, you can see how your mind is ticking. You can see all the defense systems, all the belief systems, all the agendas. If you really want to look, you can see. It's like someone's turned the lights on in a dark room, and suddenly you can see what's in the room. And so he helped me immensely in raising my consciousness levels just by being. But he also had a mystery school, and that mystery school had different therapists running different groups, and all of those groups were designed to raise your consciousness levels one way or another. And I did, I think, 18 months of mystery school altogether, full time. And it showed me who I was. It showed me the silence and stillness of my own true nature. It showed me the emptiness of everything, the emptiness of self. Wonderful. Wonderful.
What was required on your behalf to receive the most benefit from sitting with Osho?
It's the same as what's required on anyone's behalf who wants to gain something from a spiritual teacher. A willingness, an absolute willingness to listen, and a willingness to be open, a willingness to take apart what's in the way, a willingness. It is the enthusiasm of the seeker that makes the difference, that makes the big difference. The yes. It's the yes that counts. That willingness to adventure into the unknown. That willingness to let everything go. That willingness to be absolutely vulnerable. And the adventure begins.
What did that willingness look like for you?
Well, when I got involved with the Rajneesh organisation, I was running a publishing company. I had 30 sales staff and 5 clerical staff. And I wore a three-piece suit, and I was already retired at 28 years of age. And I swapped that for orange and red clothes. And a mala, a set of beads with a picture, 108 beads, with a picture of Osho on the front and back. And I took a new name, Prem Vishrant, Swami Prem Vishrant, which means restful love. And I do believe that I was given that name as a teaching or a sadhana, because there was nothing restful about Vishrant, and there was no love there. He was a sharp businessman who was out of touch with his heart. And so the beginning in my life, at the age of 33, I started to find myself as truth, and I started to find my own heart. And I really consider that that's when I began my life, when I started to find my heart. Everything before that had been a sham. They were just making money and surviving for the sake of it. When I found my heart, I started to love. I started to perceive love. Wow, what a difference my life is. I walked into my companies at the age of 33 and handed them over to my staff, because I wanted to go in search of my heart. And so I took my shoes off and I walked around Australia as a bum for about 4 years, because I gave my companies away totally to my staff. And what an adventure that was. During that period, I ended up in Pune with Osho for 5 months. And everything started to get undone. All the armor plating, the war machine that I'd become as a businessman, was getting taken apart, stripped down. And there my heart was. The true jewel of consciousness, love. Then Osho died in 1990. He left his body. And for me, in a lot of ways, that was I gave up hope on enlightenment. I gave up hope that I was going to be liberated in that way. But I didn't give up meditating. I didn't give up self-inquiring. I didn't give up the practice of openness. I continued those practices. Those who knew me may not have even known I was practicing, because all of those practices can be practiced during the day. People think meditating is just sitting silently in a room somewhere. No, if you're present to what's happening around you, to the exclusion of the mind, you're in meditation. You can practice openness every time someone does something or says something that contracts you. No one ever needs to know that you're self-inquiring. It's done silently. And so these things can be done in the marketplace while you're working, while you're raising a family. And so after 1990, when he died, I kept practicing. My love affair never died. And so I have to credit this man Osho Rajneesh, with an amazing change in my life. Amazing in that I really discovered something that was worthwhile. My own true self and heart. What can you ever pay someone for that? What can you ever do to pay them back? It's just not possible. The gratitude is immense.
The next question has been written by Jennifer. Can you speak a little about living from heart?
Yes. Can. Before living from the heart, everything was calculated in what could I get out of this? What was it in it for me? How is it going to serve me in some way? Or was it an inconvenience? And if it was an inconvenience, was I going to get something for that inconvenience? Whereas when I found heart, it wasn't so much what could I get as to what could I give? How could I take care of? How could I assist? And this is how love affects the mind. When love is present, the mind just wants to take care. It just wants to help. It wants to give. And this is the beauty of heart. This is how it affects the mind. If there was more people in the world who were operating from heart, we'd have a much better planet. It kills selfishness. Love just demolishes selfishness. It's not like you decide to become unselfish. It's just that that's how love affects you. You just want to take care. You want to give. The beauty of heart.
Next, we have a statement from Usha, who writes, "Wow, this is how you have affected me, but I don't know how to express. You have said it all, how I feel about you and how you are helping me."
You see, in wanting to pay back, Osho, in the gratitude, the best thing that a human being can do is give their life to truth so they can then become a light so others may see. This is the best thing you can do. And Osho said, if you find the light as yourself, truth, don't hide it away. Share it with everybody you meet. This is the beauty way.
The next question has been written by Kelly. So even if we experience moments of pleasure and joy, we also have to learn to surrender?
What about accepting everything? What about accepting the good, the bad, and the ugly? What about just accepting everything as it is and allowing your mind to relax? There's nothing wrong with joy. There's nothing wrong with anything really. Just accept it all and be free. You never programmed you. So why should you be so involved with what's going on, really? Just accept it all. If you don't like some of the things that are in there, don't run them. But accept it all. Self-acceptance is the foundation to higher consciousness. Because in self-acceptance, we can self-love. In self-acceptance, we accept the world as it is. In self-love, we love the world. As within, so without. It all begins inside of you.
The following question has been written by Johan. Although Osho is not here physically, do you still feel him or connect with him in any way or form?
The energy field that is here is the same energy field that was around Osho when he was alive. When awareness becomes aware of itself, it creates a Buddha field. It is the same, same, same. There are no two, there is only one. The same Buddha field. When awareness becomes aware of itself, when consciousness becomes aware of itself, it is the same. No matter who is awake, it is the same. Osho sometimes referred to himself as Gautama the Buddha. Same. The body may be different. The mind and personality may be different. But beingness is the same. The Buddha field is the same. It's the same. No difference. And so when you ask me, is Osho still here? Yes, he's here. Yes.
The next question has been written by Vanita. Hi Vishrant. Who is accepting everything, good, bad and ugly? Is it the mind?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's the mind. And so what you're teaching the mind to do is accept. And it is the mind that's doing the acceptance. In non-acceptance, the mind is in turmoil. In acceptance, the mind is leveled out, it is equanimous. And so in teaching the mind to accept, we are teaching the mind to quieten down, to rest, to not be such a nuisance. Non-resistance is the way of the heart. Every time we close, through resistance, we cut ourselves off from our own heart, cut ourselves off from love. Now, as a mind, we can serve love. But in service of love, we don't close, we don't resist, we stay open. This works well. And of course, it's going to be up to you. Because your mind is the one that closes or defends itself, offers resistance, or remains open. You're responsible for the reaction.
The next question has been written by a viewer. How do you begin this journey to living from your heart? What challenges or uncomfortabilities did you come across along the way?
Okay, so what really began it for me was I experienced unconditional love. One of the major times I experienced unconditional love was when I was lost at sea, being surrounded by sharks for 18 hours. I was in the water with my partner and we were going to die. There was just no chance of living. It turns out we were rescued, but at the time, there felt like there was no chance we were going to survive. And I looked across at my partner who was in the water with me. And this unconditional love just appeared out of nothing for her. It's just so beautiful. But it was only really a glimpse, but it was there. It was just so beautiful. And we were rescued. And I realized there was something greater in this world than what I'd ever experienced, this unconditional love. And then when that woman, and we got married, when that woman had a child, when the child was born, and I was holding it in my arms for the first time, it had just been born, and the unconditional love appeared again. Non-directional, just unconditional love. It was so beautiful. And it made me realize this is worth going for. And I started to look at my mind, and I started to remember all of the things that I'd been involved in that weren't good, that had been unsavory, where people or animals or something had got hurt, and it was my responsibility. And it literally broke my heart open. The regret of the ownership of all the things that I'd ever been doing in my life that weren't good. And my mind committed itself to serving heart, to serving love. Even though there wasn't much there, it committed itself to serving it. And there was an understanding that to serve love, to perceive love, you have to undo the mind, you have to open up, because love appears in openness. On the two major occasions that I experienced unconditional love, I had been wide open. And so then the undoing of the mind really began in earnest, taking away all the defense systems, removing all the belief systems that created contraction and resistance, until there was nothing in the way. And then there was love. It's not that love is anywhere else, it's always here. It's just that if you're really closed and defended, you don't really perceive it. That's all. And in that openness, it's there. And you just want to take care. You just want to serve. Selfishness becomes abhorrent. Open up and see.
The next question has been written by Eamon. What is the state of no mind Osho speaks about when enlightened masters transmit this nothingness that they're indicating to?
Well, so I found no mind in the early 80s when I started to meditate. I was doing dynamic and kundalini meditations, but I was also sitting and watching the breath. And I found no mind relatively easy, where the mind, you'd be there, but there was just no thoughts. And that would last for a little while after sitting, but not that long. The mind would come back. And in no mind, I think I started experiencing it first in 1982. It's like, okay, so there's nothing happening, there's no story, there's nothing happening in my head, but I'm still here. So of course the question afterwards arises, well, who am I? If I'm not these thoughts, who am I? What is this that is still here after thoughts are gone? And that was in a way the beginning of the quest for enlightenment. Who am I if I'm not these thoughts? And so with enlightenment, awareness that's aware of the mind in all human beings becomes aware of itself and stays aware of itself. It's like two permanent magnets lock on. And in that, a Buddha field is created, a field of energy that can be perceived, that quietens the mind, expands the mind, opens the heart. It's very beautiful. It's around all those who are awake. As a matter of fact, it's the only way to tell if someone's awake. If they don't have a Buddha field, no matter what they say or what they do, they're not awake. But if they do have a Buddha field, they're awake. So Osho had this beautiful Buddha field. Yeah, very beautiful. And so Satsang is about that. Satsang means association with truth. And the Buddha field is truth. You tune into it and you can find yourself as truth. And so Osho offered satsang morning and night for so many years. So people had a chance to find themselves as truth. They had a chance to get free. And satsang is probably the best vehicle for that.
The next question has been written by Susha. Hi Vishrant, did you experience pain body in Osho's presence? Your presence opens me and helps me deal with pain body. Who helped you?
Yeah, a lot of my pain body was buried, and there was a lot of really strong coping mechanisms that protected me from feeling it. And so a lot of my pain body started to come up after Osho actually died, more so than before. And it was triggered by relationship failures and life in general, because a lot of my defenses had dropped away and a lot of the coping mechanisms had dropped away. Being in Osho's presence, for me, did take me into some stuff, but not as much stuff as after he died. His presence allowed me to see how my mind was ticking, how I was defending myself. It allowed me to find the beauty of true self. The pain body tended to come up a little bit afterwards. It was like he offered the ecstasy in his presence, and afterwards I had to do the laundry. and, and I did.
The following question has been written by Averil. I have been listening to Osho discourses for a long time, and I'm in love with him. But sometimes I'm confused whether it is love or just attachment. So how to tell whether it is love or it is just that my ego is identified with him?
And so here's the thing, there can be love here and there can be attachment as well. They can both appear at the same time. Love appears and the mind says, I love you. And there's a possibility in the I owning the love that there is attachment. And then there could be primal bonding involved as well. But love stands alone. And so as the mind quietens, you get to see love stands alone. You get to see that it's actually independent of the mind. The mind is simply a witness of it. Love is very, very beautiful. The mind is capable of thought, it's capable of emotions, but it's not capable of love. It's capable of perceiving love if it's open enough. It's like a receiver, and so it can perceive love. Love is like a frequency that is everywhere, and if the mind is open enough, it can perceive that field of energy. It's a very beautiful field of energy. it affects the mind in such a lovely way. And people experience it to different degrees, but you can't own love. Love only does one thing. It loves. It doesn't do anything else. Any form of attachment has come from the mind. It hasn't come from love. And so sit back and have a look. There can be love there at the same time as attachment. But remember, attachment belongs to the mind, not to love. Love takes no prisoners.
The next question is also from Aviral. Are Osho's discourses enough to be enlightened? If not, then what else is needed?
I have a huge Osho library, which I gained in the 80s and early 90s. I used to listen to tape after tape after tape of his while I was driving in my car, or watch videos at home, because I just loved being in Satsang. I just loved that feeling, that beautiful feeling. And yes, I'm sure that helped. But if you don't remove the obstacles that are in the way, well, not much is going to happen. You can't just collect knowledge from listening to Osho or watching him on a video and think that somehow that collected knowledge is going to raise your consciousness levels. It is only practice that raises people's consciousness levels. Nothing else. The practice of meditation, the practice of self-inquiry, the practice of openness. The mind needs to be undone so it can support enlightenment. It is only with your work on yourself that enlightenment will be facilitated. In a lot of ways, what facilitates enlightenment is a great undoing of the mind. And that doesn't happen as a result of collecting knowledge, listening to tapes, watching videos. A lot of seekers get lost in this way. They think that somehow they're going to gain higher consciousness by collecting knowledge. And so they study the different teachers, they collect knowledge, and they think that somehow they've got somewhere. What they've got is knowledgeable. They probably haven't raised their consciousness levels at all. Practice openness. Practice self-inquiry. Practice meditation. Practice witnessing the mind. These things work. Collecting knowledge is the booby price.
The following question has been written by Johan. Is there any more work to be done after knowing self as truth? Does your consciousness remain the same day after day, or is there levels to knowing oneself as truth? Thank you, Vishrant. Much love.
Okay, so a person can have a glimpse of beingness as self, and then the mind holds that in memory as knowing itself as truth. But that's not truly knowing yourself as truth. That's a memory, and memory is imagined. It's not real. It's the past. Enlightenment is this moment. Awareness being aware of itself in this moment, not in some previous moment that's now held in memory, but in this moment. And so if you have a satori, which is a glimpse of your own true nature, it is an invitation to do the work to know yourself continuously as beingness. And the work involves removing all the obstacles that are in the way. Pretty much anything that contracts you, anything that takes you into resistance. Enlightenment is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, awareness being aware of itself. And because it's aware of itself, there is a Buddha field produced which can be perceived. Holding a memory of enlightenment is just dreaming. It's not enlightenment. I hope that helps.
The next question has been written by Naomi. Where does sensitivity come from, and how do we protect our innocence in the world?
Sensitivity comes from being open. The more closed you are, the less sensitive you are. The more open you are, the more you feel absolutely everything. And as far as protection is concerned, all protection is in the way. All defense systems are in the way. Openness counts for everything. And it's up to you. Are you prepared to be open? Are you prepared to support love in that way? It's up to you. You open right up, the world doesn't become a nicer place. You still get hurt, but you're not defending yourself anymore. You're remaining open. Now you're available to perceive love.
The next question has been written by Jennifer. I am empathetic, and while I see this as a gift in the service to others, I also walk through the world and pick up on many things. I can overextend myself, lose track of what's mine and what's the others. I can become depleted and burnt out. I hit a breaking point and need to go inward to come back to me. Where do boundaries come into openness? How to find balance in openness?
I have no boundary. I am openness. How high in consciousness do you want to go? Anything that supports closure, any form of defense system whatsoever, keeps you locked in lower consciousness. As you open up, everything pours in. Everything touches. It's true. There's a price for openness. There's a price for love. There's a price for enlightenment. And are you willing to pay that price, or are you not? The price for enlightenment is everything. You surrender everything, especially your defense systems. Up to you. You're the one who's going to surrender or not surrender. No one will make you do it. You have to volunteer. Ultimately, what happens is you as a mind give your life to truth. You give your life to heart. You no longer have it anymore. It is an unconditional surrender that facilitates ongoing enlightenment.
The following question is from a viewer. Can you describe the moments before your enlightenment day?
It's a little difficult because I noticed awakening on, I think it was the 30th of May, 1999. But I had been awake for probably a week or two because I'd been in the presence of an awakened man. And in his presence, I was experiencing self as truth, as everything, as the vastness and nothingness of everything. I had put it down in those 2 weeks, prior 2 weeks, to his presence. But after coming back home and discovering that there was still nobody here, that there was still awareness aware of itself, it was surprising to the mind. In a way, it was a bit of a shock to wake up the next day and find self as everything and nothing. To find that there was an absence of the I. It was a shock. And so the moments before, it's hard to say because there was the same experience, the same knowing. Now, if I go back to when I first discovered self as truth in 1987, I had been self-inquiring on the foreshore in Adelaide, Perth, Australia. I'd started self-inquiring at about 6 in the morning, and I was just walking along the river's edge, asking myself the question, who am I? And answering it in the Zen fashion, which you answer the question and then you deny it, and then you ask the question again. And at about 10 o'clock in the morning, about 4 hours after starting the practice, which was very casual, it was very laid back, very easy, slow walking, there was just nothing. I'd asked the question so many times. I came up with the answer, nothingness. And it was like an echo occurred. Nothing, 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 nothing. And then there was the experience of being absolutely everything. The whole universe, every particle. I have no idea how long that went on for. At some point, every particle as self was love also. I have no idea how long that went on for. But when I did come back into the body, there was an absence. There was just an emptiness walking. And slowly, over the next day or two, the ego claimed it all. This is in 87. And as a result, it was lost. But it was very, very beautiful. And it showed me that Osho had been right. We weren't the mind, we weren't the body. We were beingness. We were everything. And what we were could not be touched by anything, could not be harmed in any way, and could not die.
Next question has been written by Bhagavi. I started to read Osho books, and they give great contentment. However, I can read 2 or 3 books at a stretch in just a couple of days, and some books I can't read at all. Why is this so?
I can't read books at all anymore. I stopped reading about 20 years ago when I found that I just like to be rather than read. Reading's an outgoing thing. You've got your eyes outgoing. I just like to be more like receptive than outgoing. I don't know why you can read some books and you can't read others. I don't know the answer to that. I have a huge Osho library of books also, and I've read most of them, sometimes more than once. I used to be this collector of spiritual knowledge, and at some point I went to Murdoch University Library. They have a very big spiritual library, and I spent 6 months in that library studying all the old masters, the Zen masters, the Taoist masters, the Hindu masters, the Sufi masters, because I wanted to see what they had to say. And after about 6 months of reading all this literature on higher consciousness and enlightenment and the different methodologies, I discovered they were all had one thing in common to say: surrender. The very thing nobody wants to practice. Surrender. And so a surrendered mind is a mind that is equanimous. We practice surrender because you can't actually practice surrender itself, because surrender is a non-doing. But what you can practice is acceptance and let go. And in the practice of acceptance and let go, we learn surrender. And so I practiced acceptance, and I practiced let go. And I practiced it until the mind just flopped. Something came along and created contraction because I was in disagreement with it. My interest wasn't in the disagreement, it was in, why was I contracted? Why was I in resistance? What's going on here? And finding a way to undo that until there was nothing there. Until, instead of reacting to the world unconsciously, I was responding. And a lot of the time, the response was doing nothing. Whatever you practice, you're going to get good at. Most people practice resistance, defensiveness, so they're very good at that. That's survival, that's lower consciousness. High consciousness, practice openness.
The next question has been written by Vanita. Krishnamurti also says the mind cannot change itself, as what is trying to change is also a part of corrupted mind. One has to realize that, and when it is realized, transformation happens. Can you please comment?
Yeah, I disagree with Krishnamurti completely. You were born with basically a blank slate. The mind was just empty. And then you got programmed to do this and to do that. You got brainwashed by your parents, your religion, your government, your school, your peers. You took on a whole pile of belief systems that weren't necessarily in any way true. Now, as an adult, we can watch the mind, see all that, and change it all. We can take away the detrimental parts. We can take down the belief systems that aren't serving us. And so I can't agree with Krishnamurti on this point. I respect him, but I can't agree with him on this point. The mind can be altered. You look at the mind, you witness the mind. Things are seen that are detrimental, you just stop them. And so the first time that I started to do this that I remember was when I was 19 years old. And I noticed that my mind was worrying. It entertained worry. And I recognized that it had picked that habit up from my mother, who was quite good at worrying. And I decided that I didn't want to worry anymore. And so I'd watch the mind. And when worry appeared, I would simply stop it. Worry would appear, I would stop it. No negotiation, I would just stop it. And after a couple of years of watching the mind and stopping worry when it started, worry stopped coming. The mind had actually been altered. About the same time that I started that process, when I was 19, I also noticed that my mind was victim orientated. It entertained victim orientated thoughts, blaming other people, the world, even itself, for life, its problems. And so I started not entertaining victimness. I just wasn't interested in being a victim. And so a victim orientated thought would start up, and I'd just stop it. Now, if it kept coming up, I'd start to have a look at what belief systems were involved in that victim orientated thought. And I'd start undoing those belief systems. But what was actually effectively happening is the mind was being altered through intervention, the same way it was programmed in the first place, through intervention. You can change how you think. You just have to change it often enough until a new pattern comes in, a new default pattern. It's up to you. I'm not going to suggest it's easy to change the mind's patterns, because it's not. But what else you got to do if you find a pattern that's detrimental to you? If you're a victim-orientated person, you're just creating suffering for yourself. Why continue to entertain it? Why not just stop it? And keep stopping it until it doesn't rise anymore. This intervention works. Try it and see.
The next question is also from Vanita. If you begin to understand what you are without trying to change it, then what you are undergoes a transformation. From Krishnamurti. So this transformation happens with self-acceptance.
Okay. Can we stop just for a second there? What you are is not the mind. He's talking about the mind there somewhere. You're not the mind. You're not the body. What you are cannot be transformed because it already is. It's pure beingness. It's pure consciousness. What you are can't be touched. But what you're not, the false self, the I, which belongs to the mind, is the identified part of the mind, it can definitely be altered. And it can definitely be modified in a way that works better. And that is where the work is, in altering the mind so it supports love, so it supports higher consciousness, so it supports enlightenment. And in a lot of ways, that is simply stripping it down to nothing, taking away all the defense systems, undoing all the belief systems that create contraction and resistance to life. And this is exactly what I learnt from Osho Rajneesh, my spiritual master. Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.